CGTN, China Global Television Network.
On the 31st of March, the UN Security Council voted unanimously to endorse the African Union's new peacekeeping mission in Somalia. The new mission will be known as the African Union Transitional Mission in Somalia, or ATMIS, and replaces the African Union Mission in Somalia, AMISOM. Under the UN resolution, the new mission is projected to gradually decrease staffing levels in Somalia from nearly 20,000 soldiers, police and civilians to zero by the end of 2024. However, after over a decade in Somalia, AMISOM has faced repeated challenges in executing its mandate. The question now is, how will the new peacekeeping mission be effective where AMISOM has failed? I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. While the new AU transitional mission in Somalia is also authorized to take action against Al-Qaeda and Islamic State extremist groups and conduct a phased handover of security responsibilities to Somalia's government. Before we begin our discussion, my colleague Mohamed Kahie looks at how the African Union and United Nations intend to implement ATMIS.
The Somali armed forces are expected to take over their security responsibilities from the new mission within 2 years. Somalia's defense minister says that despite the challenges, AMISOM presence helped his government fight against threats of terrorism.
AMISOM operations helped the Somali government fight against terrorism. Together with Somali armed forces, they liberated swathes of key areas from the terrorist groups. Various countries sent us their troops in the fight against terrorism, and they continue to do so. The quality and capacity of Somalia's security apparatus is improving day by day too. ATMIS is expected to transfer the security responsibilities to Somali security agencies within a period of 2 years, and we are working on that schedule of withdrawal. We are expecting the draft to be submitted to the African Union and the UN Security Council for mandate approval.
Somali security agencies are expected to take a lead role ahead of withdrawal of ATMIS.
Somalia has commenced the revision of the Somalia Transition Plan to ensure that our vision, strategic objectives and priorities are aligned with the transnational nature of the threats that we face today. The revised Somali Transition Plan, along with the joint CONOPS, paves the way for the Somali security forces to lead more offensive operations built around agile, mobile and resilient forces.
AMISOM was deployed in Somalia in 2007 to help by then weak government. 15 years down the line, much has been achieved in terms of securing the country. The threats coming from armed group alshabab still remains the biggest concern. Mohamed Kahie, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Well, joining me now to look closer at peace in Somalia and the implementation of the African Union Transitional Mission in Somalia, from London, David Otto-Endele, Director on Security for the Horn of Africa Institute for Peace and Security Governance. In Pretoria, Meresa Desu, Senior Researcher and Training Coordinator at the Institute for Security Studies. And in Nairobi, Abdi Ante, former advisor to President Formaggio and co-founder of the Heritage Institute. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the program. David, if I may start off with you, because the UN Security Council has voted to replace the AU mission in Somalia, AMISOM, with the AU Transitional Mission in Somalia, ATMIS. First of all, what is the rationale behind the UN Security Council's decision?
Thank you for having me. Simply put, you know, the expectation is that AMISON, you know, is closing its doors in Somalia. But of course, the mission of AMISON was to, you know, bring stability and peace in Somalia, and that has not happened. So it's very difficult and quite a difficult position for the United Nations Security Council to then just allow AMISON to close its shop. And therefore, they came up you know, with this intermediary, which is almost like an interim, you know, force, but, claiming that, of course, it will be championed by the Somalians themselves. I hope that happens. But, this is just the strategic announcement. This kind of, changes take a long time. You've got to think about issues of transition, handover, transparency in terms of how AMISON has been run and how this new mission is going to be run. So there are several complications to that.
Right.
But I think, this is much more of a safe phase, for AMISON itself.
Right. Abdi, let me get your view here. I mean, this mission of AMISOM was to bring stability to Somalia. Is it also your assertion that it has failed? It hasn't done that?
AMISOM has a mixed record. It's been around for 15 years. There is no doubt that they have contributed significantly to the peace and security in Somalia over the past 15 years in different parts of the country, but also in different ways. They have actually been a major enabling force for the government to operate across the country, given how the government was nascent and weak and so on. But I think on the other hand, a lot of questions are being raised about AMISOM and its mission, what appears like an open-ended mission. It's been around for 15 years. Substantial amount of money is going into it. And in fact, even though they have contributed substantially to degrading the capability of the militant group alshabab, they have not been able to defeat that group at all. And in fact, the fact that they've been around too long and have not been able to defeat alshabab is creating problems within the Somali public as well.
Marissa, what's your view?
AMISOM, I think, contribute a lot. Number one, they re-establish the security apparatus in Somalia.
Right.
At least by now, there is a federal and state forces, the police, the military, though they need more strings, but I think that is one of the achievements that AMISOM have. The other thing is also they created a space for political space to establish, the civil administration as well, federal state administrations. And also, to some extent, they try to limit the expansion of Al-Shabaab and other militant groups as well. So there is achievements. But I agree with the first speaker, with Abdi, that AMISOM has been there for 15 years. So comparing the length of time that they were, so maybe there is a need for the change. That is why the ATMIS is also come. So that is my contribution. Thank you.
Right. David, let me come back to you though here, because there is this feeling as well that 15 years down the line, AMISOM, did not manage to completely defeat Al-Shabaab. Security remains the key focus in Somalia. So what exactly has changed with the new transitional mandate of ATMIS? How will ATMIS differ fundamentally from AMISOM?
I think, first of all, I hope that ATMIS will be championed by Somalians themselves exclusively. AMISOM's mission, was very clear as well. It was to bring peace and stability. And, that mission has not been achieved. I mean, I don't think AMISOM's mission was to try and bring peace. It was stated very clearly that, peace and stability will be the outcome. And as my colleague, co-panelist Abdi mentioned, they've been there for over a decade, for almost 15 years. And if you want to balance in terms of, the amount of resources and money that has been spent on AMISON, if that amount of time and resources was channeled to establish, the governance and the peace in Somalia, I think what we would have seen, within that 15-year period, would have seen some kind of an establishment of stability in Somalia. But let us be very clear that AMISOM is not just the only player in Somalia. So we have to take into consideration that, they've got other players within Somalia, which means AMISOM did not have the full, playground, so to speak, to bring back peace and stability. But as far as AMISOM's mission was concerned, I would think that they would look back and, see very huge room for, kind of lessons to be learned. And I hope that, the new mission will take that into consideration.
Right.
But I want to see Somalia taking responsibility for its own security. It may take time, but that's what you need for an independent and sovereign state.
Abdi, you're on the ground. You've been on the ground in Somalia as all this is unfolding. You know, I want to find out from you exactly why the outcome that was set out for AMISOM was not achieved. You yourself have said, you know, that AMISOM, you know, degraded al-Shabaab but did not defeat it. Why?
Well, when we talk about AMISOM, there are three main factors we have to look into. The most important factor is the political space in the country. At the end of the day, as David said, it is up to us, Somalis, to fix our country. It's not up to AMISOM or anyone else for that matter. And the fact of the matter is that our political elite have generally failed to really bring about a broad political consensus, which would have given AMISOM the underpinning they needed to really create more space. But that's one major problem. The second major problem is an internal AMISOM problem. Keep in mind, AMISOM is comprised of neighboring countries, Kenya, Ethiopia, Djibouti. Those three countries have a direct border with Somalia. And two of those countries, Kenya and Ethiopia, have had historical problems with Somalia and continue to have a pernicious, in my view, pernicious role in Somalia. So their involvement actually creates a problem of resistance on the part of the Somali people. The third problem is a funding problem. Donors are fundamentally fatigued about AMISOM. They've been pouring money into it for 15 years and are not seeing results. So much like Afghanistan, what you see is a European Union and Americans mainly who are saying, well, we've poured so much money, we could have actually used that resources to rebuild the Somali National Army if the Somali political elite were to put their act together.
Right.
So taking together those factors are, in my view, inhibiting AMISOM to achieve its stated objective.
Do you see, you know, ATMIS being given the leeway to make change here?
In my view, ATMIS is an attempt to recast AMISOM in a different light, in a new light, so to speak. And ATMIS was born out of a tremendous amount of pressure by the donors, but also by the Somali government, which drafted a document called the Somali Transitional Plan, which outlines how the Somali government aims to secure the country. The problem with ATMIS, though, is the same problems I've described earlier, but in addition, now ATMIS has an expiry date. They have a 30-month window, you know, less than 3 years effectively, to try to achieve their objective and withdraw from the country. Now, the only caveat to that is that we are now in the middle of elections in Somalia, and should a new leadership is elected in the coming weeks, that new leadership could fundamentally renegotiate the entire terms of ATMIS, and we could see ATMIS staying in the country for an indefinite period of time, or a much expedited withdrawal. Mind you, if AMISOM or ATMIS or whatever you want to call it, they withdraw from Somalia today, it's almost certain that al-Shabaab will recapture most major cities in the country. Unfortunately, because of our security forces have been reoriented for political reasons over the past few years.
Marissa, let me rope you in here and get your view on what Abdi has just mentioned. If ATMIS or AMISOM were to withdraw from Somalia, al-Shabaab might overrun the country. I mean, what's your thoughts on all of this?
I think a little bit to differ on the view that Somalia was not given the opportunity to administer themselves. I would differ slightly that AMISOM was really supporting the political apparatus of Somalia to establish, administer Somalia. And the AMISOM is basically, it's a military support. And the problem that should be underlined is Somalia, I mean, the AMISOM had not the right mandate to support political processes. That is the problems that I see. Otherwise, the civil administration was on Somalia. So AMISOM was not the one who administered Somalia anyway. But coming to your point, to the question, if AMISOM withdrew, then what will happen? It definitely it is open for al-Shabaab to control Somalia. Even with the support of AMISOM, al-Shabaab controls many parts of southern and southwest of Somalia, and then this is committing attacks including the capital city. We can see from January the incident that happened. That is the progress in that we are observing. Also in terms of capacities, financial capacities, Al-Shabaab is better collecting taxes and monies and then buying weaponries for war. Right. So Al-Shabaab is getting strength, but with the support of AMISOM, still the Somalia government could not able to defeat Al-Shabaab. But I agree with Abdi, the responsibility the main responsibility or primary responsibility for Somalia to defeat Al-Shabaab is the Somalian, it's not AMISOM. AMISOM is supporting Somalia government.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to take a break now, and when we return, we'll have more on some of the long-term goals of the peacekeeping mission in Somalia. To stay with us. Welcome back to Talk Africa. Well, still with me on the program, David Otto Endele, Meresa Desu, and Abdi Ainte. Well, before the break, we looked at some of the achievements and challenges for AMISOM in Somalia. Let's now take a closer look at some of the long-term goals of the new peacekeeping mission. Abdi, let me start off with you here, because before we went to the break, we talked about Al-Shabaab, perhaps overrunning Somalia in the event that there is no peacekeeping force here. We want to hear from you, though. Why has Al-Shabaab remained so resilient?
Well, a number of factors. I think the first one is I would say, the failure of the political elite and overall political process of the country. If that went as well as we were all hoping for, I think we would have seen a different result. In other words, the political elite are not gaining the trust of the public as much as they should have been, and that's a big problem. The second issue is they're controlling vast swathes of territory. So that's another major factor. And thirdly, as someone said earlier, in the last few years, they've gotten a lot better in collecting a tremendous amount of money to run their operations. So I think when you take these factors together, the group has become a lot more resilient and a lot more durable.
David, let's take a step back here and look at that non-weaponized solutions to, Somalia's stability, because AMISOM, has made some inroads but hasn't completely taken control of the security situation. Who needs to sit at the table if a solution was to be found?
Well, I think, as always, what one would expect is to see, a collective and collaborative, community of Somalians sitting on the table and ironing out their various differences. I think what is very clear here is that there is this psychological dependency narrative, which often is pushed by, terrorist groups like Al-Shabaab. And, of course, this is also benefits missions like AMISON. They say, if we leave Somalia, then, of course, Al-Shabaab is going to take over the government. Therefore, we should stay. But then, there is still insecurity, in spite of, AMISON being there for the past 15 years. The question again becomes, when do we have stability in the presence of AMISON, and what is the cost of AMISON's presence in Somalia, as opposed to empowering and giving governance, and also making sure that you don't have ungoverned spaces by increasing the capacity of the Somalian security forces. And of course, winning the hearts and minds of the local people by bringing in, programs that will prevent young people from seeing Al-Shabaab as the better alternative. Right.
Meresa, let me hear your thoughts here, because ATMIS's success and exit will rely on the military handover of responsibilities to an effective Somali National Army, and withdrawing from Somalia in about 2 years, in 2024. So what would need to change to achieve this and stabilize Somalia?
I think what has changed in ATMIS is almost three factors. It's not in terms of fundamental mandate change, but it is more on modalities of operations. It is, as it was mentioned, it is a transition with a time frame, exit time frame. So from coming December towards the end of this year, the mission will start reducing of its forces by 2,000, according to the mandate now given to the ATMIS. So in 9 months, again, they will reduce their forces. So reducing the forces, meaning it is, I mean, the mission is on exit mode.
Right.
If it was supposed to change, the mission could have more robust interventions or support on the political processes, reconciliations. You know, that is, for me, my observation is basically the political is the problem in Somalia. So the support should be on the political processes, equally on fighting al-Shabaab, equally the support in the political process could have been there, but unfortunately in the mandate, it is not the priority of the mandate. The mandate is now, as fighting al-Shabaab, it is to reduce forces, then exit by 2023, end of 2023.
Right. Abdi, would you say the military approach to solving Somalia situations has succeeded?
I think it's a mixed record. Over the past 15 years, the militant group has been degraded. Their capability is not as strong as it used to be, for sure. And they certainly do not control as large of a territory as they did in 2008. However, there is no doubt that we need to complement the military solution with a political solution. But when do you start that political solution, or what some people would call a reconciliation? The timing is important here. At the moment, the Somali government cannot only use carrots, it would have to also be able to use a lot of sticks first, and to really inflict a lot of pain on al-Shabaab for them to be able to come to the negotiating table, perhaps then to discuss elements of a broader settlement and to meet some of their key demands. So we already have the ingredients for a broader settlement. I think anything short of a meaningful discussion around those issues, right, specifically you have carrot and sticks, I think would be too quick at the moment.
Okay, David, let me get your views here. If the Somalis, say that they have the ingredients for a broader settlement, why is it that they are not taking the front seat in solving their own problems?
I think the primary observation is that there is a huge division in Somalia in terms of I mean, not just social, but also more so political division. This clans society, which people favor, full of favoritism. There is a huge level of corruption, but also I think there is also a huge amount of pressure, which what you call the elite, are experiencing from the hands of groups like al-Shabaab, in terms of compliance. But as long as we don't see that level of coordination and internal collaboration and the political will to bring stability in Somalia, we would always find these gaps, and these gaps will always be exploited by terrorist organizations like al-Shabaab. So I think you need Somalians to come together and to form a common front against insurgency, but also a common front against those who want to keep the country in a state of instability.
So we're going to wind up in a moment. I want to get your final comments here. And David, if that mandate by AMISOM was not achieved in 15 years, it became open-ended. Can the mandate of ATMIS be successfully executed over the next 3 years? Your answer to that and your final comment.
My answer with that, I need to see it, kick off, and start doing what it stated in its mandate. I think that there will be a very challenging one for ATMIS. I don't see any progress or any difference in terms of what AMISON did to what ATMIS is going to do. What I'm hoping, as a matter of fact, is that it creates an opportunity for the Somalian National Army and other security agencies to use this opportunity, some kind of a transition to self-governance or protecting the integrity of the entire Somalia. That is what I hope that this will be achieved. And if that is achieved, and if we can see Somalian National Army being independent and running its own affairs, I mean, there is no hard feelings in terms of having support from outside the country, but let it be bilateral agreements and let the mandates be clearly stated. I hope that ATMIS will bring forth much more an opportunity for the Somalian National Army to take charge of the country, as a matter of fact.
Right. Abdi, what next for Somalia?
We are in the middle of elections right now, which is a protracted election. It took more than a year and a half, and it's still ongoing, and it continues to face major problems. Depending on the outcome of these elections, our country could actually go in a positive and upward trajectory, or if we emerge from these elections, it could create bad issues for us.
Right. Marissa, your view on that and your winding up comment.
So in the coming, as I said, this is a transition. Okay, the mission is in transition. So in 9 months' time, it will reduce its forces. So while reducing its forces, and the mood is on exit mood. So with that sentiment, and then as Al-Shabaab is also growing, there is a need to focus more on the political aspect, to support the political processes, so that Somalia political elites to find a way how they can secure Somalia by themselves and then strengthen Somalia security forces. But from the mission side, I don't see in the coming years they will change differently from previous.
All right. And that's all we have time for this week on the program. But thank you to my guests, David Otto Endele, Director on Security for Horn of Africa Institute for Peace and Security Governance, Marissa Desu, Senior Researcher and Training Coordinator at the Institute for Security Studies, and in Nairobi, Abdi Ainte, former advisor to President Farmajo and co-founder of the Heritage Institute. Remember, we'd love to hear your feedback through our social media handles on Facebook and Twitter. You can also catch the show on our YouTube playlist. Do keep the conversation going and tune in again next week for more Talk Africa. From me, Beatrice Marshall, and the team in Nairobi, it's goodbye.